So good morning, everyone. My name is Jens Pillgram Larsen. I am currently a Director of Engineering at LinkedIn. Been working with Gradle for almost 6 years. And the little arrow there is I'm right now in my last week at LinkedIn. And in a couple of weeks, I'll be working at YouTube on the same space of software development infrastructure. What I want to talk to you about today is essentially building products for software development. And I want to tell you a story about LinkedIn and Google, which is fitting given my current transition, and then Android and Gradle, which is, again, we're at the Gradle Summit, so I figured that was pretty relevant. So I'm an early riser. I get up early in the morning, about 5:30. I go into work, I do a little exercise, and then I like playing around with some technology before everyone else gets in, figuring out what's going on. And I'd heard a lot about Android development, how great it was, Android Studio with Gradle, this is going to be awesome. So I decided one morning that I was going to play around with the LinkedIn Android app. So this is, if you have an Android device, you have your LinkedIn app. This is the source code. This is what fuels this. So I get the code base checked out. Everything's going well. I have a cup of coffee. And then about, as you can see, 8 seconds into the build, I get this. So SDK location not found. Define the location with SDK dir and the local properties. Okay, I don't have a local properties file, but that's okay. But I do understand environment variables. Before I was a director of engineering, I was actually a software engineer, so I get these environment variables things. But where do I get this SDK thing, and what do I actually need? That doesn't really tell me anything about that. Okay, at LinkedIn, I'm sure everybody in all the companies, wherever you are, there's a central repository of information, all the information. At LinkedIn, that is collected on the wiki. So next step is I know to go to the wiki and start looking for information on where to find this Android SDK and what I need. Of course, I find all kinds of out-of-date pages, everything, but I finally find a wiki page that has a step number 3 out of 7 or so says, hey, load up Android Studio, go click on this SDK manager thing because you're going to need an SDK. Okay? So cool, I found the relevant information on the wiki. I go and thankfully there's a screenshot on the wiki because if not, I think I would still be searching for where the SDK manager was hiding down there under configure. Along with other things that seem completely unrelated, but okay. All right, I found the SDK manager. And now I got the SDK manager, and I got all these very tasty sounding version numbers, or versions. Okay, awesome. Which one of these do I need to build a LinkedIn Android app? I have no idea. So I do what any sensible human being does in this situation. I choose everything because, come on, I mean, storage is cheap, network is cheap, right? So you pick everything. Cool. I'm sure it won't take that long to install. Then I click on the SDK tools button, and now things are going really sideways for me. I consider myself a pretty smart guy. I have a master's degree in computer science from Stanford. I know what LLDB is, although my guess is a lot of people who see this page don't. But do we use LLDB in the LinkedIn Android app? I have no clue. Do I need the Google Play APK expansion library? I don't know. But these like Android SDK build tools, Android SDK platform tools, Android SDK tools. Couldn't we just decide we have one tools? That would be great. And really, yes, at this point, I really, really, really want the documentation. But I'm heartened because I see this little checkbox in the bottom right that says, show package details. Yes, I need some more details at this point. I'm completely lost. Please help me. It's not what you might think. So now, by selecting this checkbox, I have the option of getting alpha and beta versions of these libraries or these things I have no idea if I need or not. So at this point, the wiki page didn't help me, unfortunately. So thankfully, I knew there was a person in my team that I could go talk to and ask, what of these things do I actually need? And so I was able to figure out which packages to install. I hit the apply button. It turns out that installing 20 Android SDKs actually does take a fair amount of time. So I did something else, came back, and tried to build again. And of course, I'm a complete idiot. Because just installing the SDK does nothing to solve my environment variable problem. I forgot to set the environment variable. So we're back here again, but okay. But now at least I know I have the SDK somewhere on my machine. I'm pretty sure, because the little dialog box went from 0 to 100% a number of times. And then it finished and it said success. So it's got to be there somewhere. What I forgot to notice when I was in the SDK manager was there's a path up there. I should have written that down or something at the time. But I totally forgot to notice that. So we're back to the wiki page. And thankfully, some of the test engineers have a different wiki page that says, hey, by default, your Android SDK goes here. So, okay, great. We got this Android environment variable set. And lo and behold, my build now takes longer than 8 seconds. Feels like 8 hours, but that's okay. I know Hans is working on that. Great. Okay, we got a nice build flowing. There's megabytes and megabytes of text scrolling by on the screen, telling me lots of stuff is going on. Good. I feel good. The machine is like, a little fan is humming, etc. So stuff's got to be running, right? And then, a little while in, I start getting this on the screen. And I purposely zoomed out and everything to make it really hard for you to see what's going on the screen here, because this is actually my code, the code that I'm responsible for. And I'm kind of embarrassed by it, so I don't want you to see it. But it starts off by saying, warning. One or more keys defined in one or more source app defs. Okay, so I work at LinkedIn. I worked at LinkedIn for 5.5 years. I know what an app def is. You probably don't and shouldn't, nor does half of LinkedIn's developer population at this point. But still, that makes no sense to me whatsoever. Then it gets better. Warning for static config __ R2 default blah 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 and then there's 2 file paths separated by a comma. And that's it. That's the message. Warning. Big warning. What does this mean? I'm deeply into this world. I have no idea what it means. Who is this message intended for? And why is there so much of it? Why are they telling me? What am I supposed to do next? I have no idea. So I think all of us have probably seen every single build you run, you probably see tons and tons, pages and pages of text scrolling by log messages. And you've just gotten accustomed, used to just letting that just scroll by. Yeah, it's all good, right? If it comes out at the end, Gradle says build successful, it's all good. We've just gotten so accustomed to, if there's anything in that log output, just ignore it, and it will go away. Somebody else will deal with it. We'll figure it out. It's no problem. This actually violates 2 core sensibilities. The first one is the one that we talk about a lot. It's the engineering sensibility of, this actually takes time to compute all of this and print it out on the screen. It's inefficient. It doesn't make any sense. It violates our engineering sensibility. But what I want to focus on more today is violating the product sensibility. So when I talk to engineers at LinkedIn, good engineers, great engineers, they see these kinds of messages, they go through workflows like the SDK manager, and they're frustrated. They feel friction, they feel pain. And that's because the tools weren't built with them in mind. They were first implemented, and then there was kind of like, oh yeah, we need some way of interfacing with this. So when these log messages come through and you just start ignoring them, it still creates that little bit of friction in people's minds. So why do we, and I say we in the larger context of people who build tools and systems for software development, why do we do this to people over and over and over again? I think it starts with the core of, if you're familiar with behavioral economics, there was a very famous term coined about 10, 15 years ago, an econ. Essentially, in economics, they had started building theories around a completely rational actor, so that people were completely rational. Oh, you've got 70 choices for places to where to put your 401k retirement. That's cool because you're rational. You can figure out what is the right investment mix for you. Of course, humans aren't like that. If you overload them with information, if you overload them with choices, you can actually cause a lot of harm. And I think we've fallen into the trap of building tools for engineers. So who are these engineers? Engineers is a completely rational, deep debugging skills, completely understands the implementation and the intent of the system. That's our model user, right? When we see a user who struggles to use our tools, the first thing we jump to is, oh man, they must be dumb. They must not be very good engineers, right? And then a human is this deeply flawed, emotional being who gets overloaded with information. And I think we've need to come to terms with the fact that we are all human. Even the best engineers among us still get overloaded with information, still fail to understand the implementation or the intent behind how a tool works in the software development space. So when you think about these roles, essentially, the engineers, the first thing we do when we see a problem, the first thing I do when I see a problem is I can't help it. I got to go solve that problem. I got to go fix that problem. Doesn't matter whether it's like, managing a person or, solving a software development problem. The first thing, I jump to implementation. It's funny, actually, this came up at breakfast today, and I think the moniker is ready, fire, aim. We do a lot of that, right? And I can tell you this is an evolution for me as I'm now a decade into my professional experience. Even a few years ago, I would probably jump to just fix, just get it done, right? The problem is that the people who use what we build are human, right? So they have these deep flaws, or rather, they are simply what they are, and we need to build tools, we need to build products for them, not for the other engineers. And so I think there's a key role, there's a key function missing in a lot of software development workflows, which is this concept of the product owner. So I made this specifically vague. Earlier versions of this slide or earlier versions of this deck was talking about a product manager. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. It doesn't have to be that stereotypical product manager, but somebody needs to own the project. Somebody needs to own the product, and somebody needs to bridge between the implementation and the usage, and think of that as one of their core functions. The other thing I came to realize is that we make really crappy product owners in general, by and large, because we jump to the implementation, because we jump to doing first. And it's really hard, once you've already implemented something, once you already decided how to build something, it's really hard to build a great interface, to build a great interaction on top of that. We try really hard, but it's not the way to build a really great product. And also, a lot of times what we end up with is something that is too complex, is too big, it does too much. So it all starts with us jumping to the implementation and building the product from that, rather than the other way, starting with a product definition, starting with what problems do we want to solve, how do we want users to interact with it, and what problems are we not going to try to tackle with this system. So what we end up with a lot is systems, software development products that look something like this. So I remember starting to work with Gradle 0.8, I think about 6 years ago. And it was wonderfully simple in Java. Kind of, you applied the Java plugin and you got a few tasks. And now there was still some of this log spew and things like that, but it was wonderfully simple. When I go to try to look at Gradle or try to do something with Gradle today, this is what I meet. This is what I encounter. Gradle can solve every problem I can think of, and 100 problems that I never even thought of. But doing even the most basic thing, like if I just want a screwdriver, it takes me forever to find the screwdriver. And I got to decide, am I going to do the screwdriver in Groovy or Kotlin, or apply this combination of plugins, or like even what plugins are available out there. At LinkedIn, I've built a bunch of systems that ended up like this, because it's so easy to just there's more problems out there, so I'll just keep adding more solutions to the system. They're not, by and large, simple and intuitive solutions. So actually, this is the key thing, is when you start with an implementation, when you start with solving problems, it's very hard to make it simple and intuitive. You have to start with how the users interact with it. And I have some good examples of software development products that are really simple and intuitive later on. The other thing that's going on, this is something we all know, this is a big reason why I think we're all here today, is that software development is in this generational transition. So meaning it's not an iterative time for software development. It's not just adding new things on top. It's not just making things slightly better. It's really about building software in an entirely new way. Software is everywhere. Every single company out there needs to build a mobile app, needs to build software internally and externally. And the next generation crop of software development tools have a completely new audience. Sure, I mean, living here in Silicon Valley, you might think that everybody has a deep CS background who are doing software development, this very deep systems knowledge. You go out around the country, around the world, that's just not the case. Almost everyone is doing some kind of software development at different levels of abstraction. And we have the cloud computing, we have containers, runtime, schedulers, etc., that are making it way easier to spin up new applications, to spin up new software. So what I want the call to action from this keynote to be, from this day, the Friday of the Gradle Summit, before you go into your weekend, is there's a fantastic amount of infrastructure engineering talent in this room, at this conference, in your company, in your group where you're working. Develop this product intuition, develop the product thinking within your existing infrastructure engineers and identify those people who have a deep sense, deep longing for product thinking, for thinking about the user, for thinking about interaction design, for thinking as a product owner. And then I think we need to invite a new set of people into the infrastructure engineering organizations who are not deep systems infrastructure engineers, but are by their core left brain product people, artistic, interaction designers, people who really can think about how to make great UI UX. And then use these skills to build a next generation of great software development products. And I have some examples coming of what I consider such. But I also think it's more than about building just great software development products. It's really about building transformational products at this point. So what is a transformational product? So transformational product is one that takes you really think of a before and after, right? In many ways for us, Gradle has been one of these transformational software development products where there was a world before and there was a world now, and we can't imagine doing the kind of things that we do without having Gradle there. One example, I think, of a transformational software product is, so I poked some fun at Android Studio and the SDK Manager early on, but once I got past all that, once I got into Android Studio and really started playing around with it as a product, it's really truly an integrated development environment. It is really truly transformational. Of course, Android is too. But just some of the simple workflows, this is my favorite example, but there are lots more of them, of you change the code and you can see a whole set of different devices and how your code, how your layout is playing out on those. That's something I, as a human, this is simple and intuitive. I can really easily understand this. It's visual. It's in a format that I can truly understand. So Android Studio, I think, is showing us what an IDE can be. And we're trying to learn a lot from this at LinkedIn, and I think we're well on our way there as well. And then going from Android Studio, I think the next step is, what's going on with Kotlin. So if you've ever seen or talked to JetBrains about why they built Kotlin and why they built Kotlin the way they did, it all starts with the why. It all starts with the product thinking. We wanted our JetBrains engineers to be more productive by taking out some of the idiosyncrasies of Java, making these things easier, making these things faster, more readable, more scannable. But it all started with the why, and then they went and implemented it. And it turned out that they were both the engineering, the implementation, and the product thinking made for a really great programming language, and maybe one that's transformational and certainly seeing a ton of adoption. And I think that's how we win. I think that's how we go from experiences like what I had with the Android SDK Manager, what I have and what our engineers have with log spew or confusing megabytes worth of logs, to a system that human beings can truly understand natively, intuitively, for how to build the next generation of great software products. And that's what I have. Enjoy your Friday, enjoy your weekend, and go build great software development products. Thank you very much.